this show has been incredibly far-reaching within our industry and has had real impact and definition about how you do shows on this scale. And we learnt that from the very beginning, from working with the very kind of, what is now seen as quite possibly rudimentary thinking about how you make TV, to now the very height of sophistication with that last episode that you've just seen.
It's been 2 years since the second season of the show aired. Obviously, there have been some global challenges, but was there ever kind of a moment where you were afraid that the third season was not going to happen?
No. I think we'd always planned to have a bigger gap between season 2 and season 3 to let our 2 young leads grow to an age where they could tackle the full storyline of season 3, and they just needed to be that bit older. And we were keen, we liked that Lyra aged between season 1 to season 2, and then again a bigger leap to season 3. I think that for audiences, I've always felt that one of the things that was gave a sort of wonderful stickiness for an audience to Game of Thrones was being able to see those young Stark kids grow up. And I think watching Lyra and Will grow up has been an important part of that process. But I always felt that, we were just determined that His Dark Materials was going to come back, no matter what in COVID. We were one of the production companies who started filming very early on with the discovery of witches. And by the time we worked our way through that, it was the time that we'd always planned that we would go into production on His Dark Materials, and we did. And I mean, huge thanks to all the cast and crew for kind of for holding with us through all of that.
Were there ever conversations about, trying to pull any additional material into a 4th season, or splitting, the Amber Spyglass into 2 seasons, or any of those other things that are, I think, kind of common with book adaptations these days?
I'll just answer this one very quickly. So I did say in San Diego Comic-Con, I think it was in 2019, and a heady rush of glory in season 1 going out, that the subtle knife I knew could only be 1 season's worth, because it's slightly it's just a smaller book than the first or the third, but the third was huge, and that maybe we needed 2 seasons for that. And actually then when we came to sort of look at it properly, having kind of got over that heady first rush and began to look at it and think, all right, how are we going to tackle this adaptation? It was clear it was only 1 season. I also think that there has been probably a bit of a trend for extending material further than the material should be extended. And whilst there are definitely elements of the Amber Spyglass that we haven't had time to do, like, for example, spend more time with Mary Malone in the with Anatal in the world of the Mulefa, I actually think we did manage to essentially do everything that we needed to do. It felt the right shape in the end. And you need to leave people wanting more, not kind of like, oh, this is going on a bit too long.
And you just touched on this, but so I read these books as a kid, and my favorite thing from the whole series was the Mulefa. That's like what stuck with me throughout the years. So can you both talk about the process of bringing them to life for this season?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it was the thing as we were kind of marching through season 1 and 2, like we kind of, season 1 and 2 were made before anybody had seen season 1. The thing that we would almost kind of tease ourselves about is what are you going to do with the kind of, diamond structured, trunk-like, creatures that ride on nuts? What are you going to do with that? It kind of became a bit of a kind of, like I said, it was something that it was like, if you think like, 2 bears fighting is hard, wait until you get to the Mulefa. And it was this constant kind of joke throughout, to the point where I think, Jane mentioned it at the premiere of season 1. In our early discussions with Pullman, and this is power to Philip. This is that thing that only authors can have when you've got that absolute objectivity. When you've got lots of people running around trying to, make lots of different things and worrying about, the size of the intention craft and, those kind of like, practical elements. You've got, Pullman's Pullman laid down quite early on, a kind of a red line for him almost was the Malefa, their existence, their kind of their symbiosis with nature, and their ability to communicate with Mary, and the fact that they're these kind of wiser beings was kind of essential to him, in ways that we didn't fully understand, I think, until now. But to have those first images get out there, to have them go down so well, and so many people, talk about the idea that perhaps we might have, seen something in someone's heads and shared something. I kind of feel, it shows how in tune the people are from working on the show and what they ended up, what they created and forming. Because this wasn't easy, but it came easy to us because we've been existing and kind of living and breathing dark materials for so long. So by the time it came to language construction, by the time it came to physical, performance by a person playing a Malefa, by the time it came to an actor playing the voice, who we get to announce, but we will be soon. And when it came to Simone's interaction, who, Simone had only ever been, who plays Mary Malone, had only ever been in her world. So by the time all those confluence things came together, I really believe we were a full-on orchestra of ability when it came to program making. I think we've delivered. I hope we've delivered. They do everything they say that they do in the books. And they really do, I think, present the deeper, more meaningful themes of dark materials and the different worlds and their existence, and the extremes of kind of perfection with nature and harmony and wisdom, compared to the magisterium back in Lyra's world, the kind of the opposite in thinking.
Something that I also especially love about the series, no matter what kind of world we're in, it's just the locations are so beautiful. There's one in season 3. There's like a house by the sea that I think is just absolutely gorgeous. But I was curious, what's the process like of determining when you're building a set and when you're scouting for a location or just creating something, in a studio? So
most of, I think, probably without exception, everything has a set element to it. So that place by the sea, we actually built the interior of that in the studio and then went to film that exterior. I think it was modeled on 2 places in the end, actually. I think we took an exterior and then put it into we put it into an environment effect shot as well. So even the Malefa world some of it is set and some of it is on location in Spain. And the way we looked at that was to try and get enough that was in a studio so that we would be able to get through all the material that we were able to get through in a studio environment, to give the actors something to be able to control how we were going to put the effects in, but to give the actors a real solid base. So we just weren't putting everyone into an LED stage or just against a green screen all the time. So they had, real soil to kind of like beneath their feet, but at the same time to place our sets in the real world, because whilst our adaptation of his dark materials, this fantasy, it's very grounded fantasy. And, we were constantly wanting an audience to compare it to what they know.
And then I'll leave this one, but, I was just curious, now that the series is kind of coming to an end, what has been your favorite part of adapting this series?
There are so many bits to adapt in this show. It's impossible. It's impossible to pick one thing. I mean, the only thing I can say is just the journey, the learning, the experience, the people that you've met and the collaboration with the artists, from, the writers to the actors, to the puppeteers, to the VFX animators. This show has been incredibly far-reaching within our industry and has had real impact and definition about how you do shows on this scale. And we learnt that from the very beginning, from working with the very kind of, what is now seen as quite possibly rudimentary thinking about how you make TV, to now the very height of sophistication with that last episode that you've just seen. A few weeks, that was only finished a few weeks ago. In one weekend, we had 800 man days spent on just that one episode, a huge push by our digital artists to get that ready and on time. And that was such an incredible feat. And for that to happen right at the end of everything else was just this most incredible feeling of groundbreaking effort, from so many people who want to make the book and do it justice and to bring fans and bring a new audience, to the world of Dark Materials.
Oh, I was just going to say very quickly that really super quickly, I've never seen an actor put a character together in the way that Ruth Wilson put Mrs. Coulter together. That combination of costume, makeup, working with Bran the puppeteer with the golden monkey, physically changing herself for the role, and then digging into the character and how she lands the sort of authenticity behind the fantasy. I mean, the whole putting together of that was a piece of artwork in and of itself.
Well, thank you both so much.
Thank you.